What is up, New York Mets fans? Welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast, the True Mets Talk live stream. And it is a great day to be a New York Mets fan. It's your boy CP, and we are here talking about the Stanek re-signing and also the situation that is going down with Pete Alonso. I hope everyone is having a fantastic Wednesday. It's about 4:21 p.m., just approaching evening time here on the East Coast. And hopefully this stream finds you well, especially Mets fans, because we have a lot to talk about. It's always a great day when the New York Mets make another addition, especially with the guy that was a staple during the New York Mets playoff run back in 2024. If you are here on this stream, in the live chat, make sure to vote in the live chat poll. Make sure to drop those comments. I'll get to some of the comments while we keep the conversation flow going. And as always, subscribe to the channel and smash those thumbs up buttons. If you're watching over on the X account, make sure to come on over to YouTube if you haven't subscribed yet and participate in the live chat. I definitely appreciate it. I want to hear all of your thoughts and opinions on Stanek, on Pete Alonso, and everything else that we have to talk about here in this live stream. I'm going to try to break it down as efficiently as possible. Salute to River. Salute to David Jr., my guy Jr. in the chat. Haven't seen you in a while. Always good to see you. And Dan as well. It is always good to see everybody in the live chat. I'm going to try to keep this a short stream, but you all know I like to ramble on and on and on as we talk about our beloved New York Mets. All right, let's talk about Ryne Stanek. Ryne Stanek, we got the news earlier today. Unfortunately, I couldn't go live right away because I was out and about, and this news really did catch me by surprise. If you all missed the actual live stream that we did, here shortly or recently on the channel with Rob and myself, we had a special guest on. Mets reporter for Sports Illustrated, Pat Ragazzo, joined the show, and we were talking all things New York Mets, talking about the rotation. We were talking about Pete Alonso, and we were also talking about the bullpen, to which I specifically asked, and I made sure to ask, with the interest that Stanek was getting from both the Braves and the Cubs, what's happening with Ryne Stanek? Are the Mets in on the Stanek market or not? And it was quiet, according to Pat Ragazzo. And it was quiet on social media. And that's kind of how the Mets operate. And they have been operating in particular, right, in this new regime with David Stearns at the helm. But to our pleasant surprise, I know Mets fans in general, especially on this channel and all the polls that I post related to the rotation or the bullpen, excuse me, everyone wanted Ryne Stanek back. Stanek stands is what this fan base is filled with, and rightfully so, because he is an electric arm. And according to Andy Martino, it's a one-year deal for Ryne Stanek. We knew he was always going to be in line with the numbers that he posted collectively in both a Mariners and a Mets uniform last season. He was always going to be in line for a one-year deal. And, with the other names on this market that are left, as it pertains to relievers, we knew that Ryne Stanek was also at this juncture of the offseason going to be the cheapest option for the New York Mets to bring back. And we'll get into why that's kind of important. And if you read, Martino's tweet here that's on his X account, it kind of goes into that just a little bit, but I'm going to expand on that. We'll talk about some Heyman reports following this signing. We'll talk about Martino and what he's been tweeting out as well. And we'll get into all of that. But it's a $4 to $5 million deal. It's around $4.5 million. I believe it's $500,000 worth of incentives if he hits all of his incentive marks for the 2025 season. And these are the numbers up front in what Ryne Stanek posted in 2024. Now, clearly these numbers were elevated. He didn't have really a great first half of the season in Seattle. The New York Mets clearly were interested in him last offseason before he went to Seattle, and they apparently liked enough of what they saw in terms of what he has provided in his background going back to his Houston Astros days to bring him on board at the middle of that trade deadline, the middle of the 2024 season. And he got off to a slow start. Let's be honest. in a Mets uniform, Ryne Stanek really needed to gain his footing. And the overall numbers to the second half of the season in the Mets uniform really weren't pretty either for Ryne Stanek. But he was such a key contributor to the New York Mets playoff run. And he's such a versatile arm, as is this entire Mets bullpen at this point that they're bringing on and kind of formulating. We'll get into the bullpen outlook here on the next slide and discuss some names and scenarios. But he's such an electric and versatile arm. You know, he has experience in multiple different innings. He did close for the New York Mets on a handful of occasions when Edwin Diaz was getting some rest in between appearances. You know, he can be that setup guy as well, in case, you know, AJ Minter has to take on the responsibility of the seventh inning. And these options that David Stearns is now giving, and Steve Cohen, I should say, both of these guys in the Mets front office that are leading the charge are giving Carlos Mendoza, provide Mendoza with the utmost flexibility, which is so very important. It's so very important, and I cannot stress that enough. So having multiple arms that know the role of multiple different, you know, innings in the bullpen is key. 55 and a third innings pitched for Ryne Stanek in 2024 collectively, a 4.88 ERA, 1.32 in the WHIP category. The walk percentage I highlighted because that is always the downfall of Ryne Stanek when he doesn't have success, is because of the free passes. We want to see that go down in 2025. From 2023 to 2024, his walk percentage actually increased by about a percentage point, and it needs to go back down at least to league average. And then we can start being a little bit more comfortable in some of those bigger spots. But you know, all that aside, we take a look at the electricity of his fastball. I mean, he's consistently 98, 99, 100 miles per hour with the four-seam fastball. He has a splitter that is objectively, you know, for a fact, his best pitch that he throws around 21% of the time, in addition to the four-seam fastball. And he also has a slider as his tertiary pitch, which is not on the same level as his fastball nor his splitter. That produces an above average strikeout rate, and striking out hitters is exactly what he knows how to do. Can you imagine how hard it is to step into a batter's box when a guy is throwing damn near 100 miles per hour, right? A four-seamer. And then you're down 1-2-0-2, and he comes back with a wicked splitter with insane movement that has a 10-mile-per-hour differential than the fastball that you just saw the previous pitch. It's keeping hitters on their toes, even with only two predominant pitches, is exactly what Ryne Stanek knows how to do. And this is why he was such a vital part of this playoff team that we saw in 2024 for the New York Mets in getting them to where they got to. Now, the other guys also contributed as well, but you see the electricity that he provides, right? Just screaming, letting out roars after a huge out. That's the type of mentality, and those are the types of guys that us Mets fans should be ecstatic about in rejoining this bullpen. And I know a lot of people weren't sold on the bullpen last season. I think they really had flashes of brilliance. I was pretty accepting of them, to be honest with you. If you go back to all of our streams that we did in the pregame and the postgame, I liked the bullpen, right? And I think that there was a lot of turnover in the bullpen, and David Stearns did a hell of a job mitigating that turnover, whether it was suspensions, whether it was DFAs, whether it was injuries. The bullpen looked drastically different from opening day to game 162 going into the playoffs. And that's something that the Mets are gearing up for and preparing for with the personnel that they are bringing on board for this 2025 season. We're going to see in spring training a lot of different competitions at all positions, but definitely in this bullpen. And I'm so happy that Ryne Stanek is going to be a part of it, because also you go along with the arsenal and just his capabilities as a pitcher, as a veteran. I believe he's 35 years old. He's been around this league for a long time, but just the experience level that he has as well can go a long way. Being a part of a very successful You could probably call them a little bit of a dynasty out there in Houston, being a part of those teams that were continuously making deep runs in the playoffs or going to the World Series. And that's going to pay dividends for the New York Mets as they embark on a very tough journey in the National League that is absolutely stacked. So appreciate everybody in the chat. We got a lot of people here. Keep on smashing those thumbs up buttons. As David is saying, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you want more Mets content, I got you all covered. I dropped multiple videos yesterday. We did a stream yesterday as well, so we were 3 for 3 on the channel. We got you covered, and I got you covered right here on the True Mets Talk podcast. Salute to everybody in the chat. I definitely appreciate it. All right, let's take a look at the New York Mets bullpen outlook going into 2025. How can you not like what you see right here? And I'll get into the different, color codes here in terms of the stoplight, yellow, green, and red, and what they can mean in terms of the projections for the Mets bullpen. But just look at the names on here. Look at the names. This is awesome. This is an awesome job by David Stearns in building out this bullpen. And not only to provide the upfront names, the top 6 that you see in green that are sure locks for the bullpen to start off the season, but also the depth. I just mentioned the turnover. How do you mitigate that as an organization, right? The Dodgers did a fantastic job with that in their rotation and their bullpen last year, and it served them well with a World Series title. These names and this core of bullpen guys, it almost emulates that. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say this is Dodgers 2.0, right? In the bullpen outlook, I'm not going to say that. But when you're trying to sell me on seeing an okay bullpen from 2024, right? And seeing those flashes of brilliance and trying to make that even stronger and get it into the elite category in 2025, well, that's what you do. You bring back the right pieces and you add on the right pieces. And I should say add on the right piece in AJ Minter, who I absolutely love for this team as that primary lefty option. Now, the names in green, like I just mentioned, they're going to be a part of this team no matter what in 2025. With the exception, and this is where we kind of can get into a little bit of different scenarios here with guys that have options remaining, with guys that don't have options, whether the Mets really are going after any more bullpen help, which I'm not convinced at this point that they will do, but I understand that we've talked about Tim Hill. If you missed that Tim Hill breakdown that I did on the channel with the Mets being interested in the former Yankees left-handed reliever, make sure to go check that out on the channel. But, there are a lot of different avenues the Mets could go down. Daniel Nunez is a name that I would watch out for because he's healthy at this point. I'm pretty sure we haven't heard of any setbacks. I think that he was already throwing in some capacity this past winter, which is awesome. He had his season cut a little bit prematurely due to an unfortunate injury, but he does have options that are attached to his contract, especially with his emergence onto the scene back in 2024, about midway. Do the Mets start the season off with Daniel Nunez in the bullpen, or are they going to start him off in AAA? Now, the only reason I say that, and I'm not convinced that the Mets are going to do that, given the electricity that he provides and given what he could provide for this bullpen. But if you take a look at FanGraphs, just type into Google Mets roster FanGraphs, and they'll give you a projection of what they're projecting the Mets opening day roster to be like. And they have Daniel Nunez projected out to be in AAA to start the season because, as you all know, with the 6-man rotation, the Mets only have room for 7 guys in this bullpen. And it really is going to rely and depend on if David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza want to deploy one lefty in AJ Minter, or they want the dual lefty option, whether it's an internal competition, the name's in yellow, and that's why they're in yellow, because it depends on if the Mets are really interested in adding another reliever, and let's say a Tim Hill this offseason. Genesis Cabrera and Danny Young could be vying for those spots, right? One of those last spots. Jose Butto, depending on what the Mets do from here on out, could be either in the bullpen, right? As we saw him for most of the 2024 season, or he could be competing for a sixth spot in that rotation. Griffin Canning could be competing for a rotation, or he could be a swing man in the bullpen. There's so many different scenarios at play here. But with this look right now, especially in bringing back Ryne Stanek, I would have to assume that guys like Sean Reed-Foley and Max Kranick are going to be strict AAA depth to start the season. And if you also take a look at FanGraphs, and if you're wondering where Tyler McGill enters this equation, they are also projecting him to start off in AAA. The names that they're projecting to start off in AAA is Daniel Nunez, right? Again, I'm a little bit weary on that, and it depends on how the Mets are going to utilize that last bullpen spot. And that also depends on how they're going to utilize the last rotation spot, because they also have Paul Blackburn that could be a candidate for that last rotation spot. So if Paul Blackburn gets that spot, where does Griffin Canning go? He needs to have a rotate or a bullpen spot as a long man. Now, again, this is very long-winded, but all this to say is that there are so many different options, and this spring training is going to be filled with competition. Huascar Brazaban is slated to be AAA depth. A handful of other names that I'm forgetting. Tyler Zuber is slated to be AAA depth. There's so many other names that could be competing for a bullpen spot that there's just simply no spots for at this point when you take a look at when the Mets have to cut down to 26 guys come opening day. If I had to guess, I would say that you're looking at Daniel Nunez being on the roster. Would it shock me if he starts his season off in AAA? No. At that point, you would need to have Jose Butto in the bullpen. And I know a lot of Mets fans prefer Jose Butto to be in the bullpen as it is, and I completely agree with that at this point, especially if Paul Blackburn is going to be ready to take that sixth spot come opening day. And all indications, as far as the recent report and the recent news just about 2 weeks ago that I heard of him coming off of back surgery, is that I don't know what a spring training outlook looks like at this point. I don't know if he started throwing, but they are projecting at the very minimum Paul Blackburn to be ready by opening day. So many different avenues. Again, don't know what's going to happen to the guys in yellow. Jose Butto is going to be on this team no matter what, whether it's the rotation or the bullpen. But guys like Genesis Cabrera, Danny Young, Max Kranick, Sean Reed-Foley, it's really a toss-up. It's really up in the air. So as we are talking about all these options, isn't it refreshing to be talking about so many different avenues and routes that the Mets can go down? Isn't it refreshing to not just rely on giving a single guy that roster spot, whether he's earned it or not, in spring training? For me, it is. And that's going to make spring training and watching spring training, now that we're coming up on about maybe 3 weeks left until it begins, it's going to make it that much more exciting. And we're going to be talking about all these games. We're going to be doing post-game streams. We're going to be assessing the performance levels. And then clearly, we're going to be doing a big stream. Last year was like 2+ hours of us talking about what the final roster come opening day could look like. But Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter, Ryne Stanek, any way you shake that out, whether AJ Minter is in the 7th inning, and I would probably prioritize him in the 8th inning just to go right, left, right, instead of left, right, right, when you're trying to bridge the 7th and 8th to get to Diaz in the 9th. But there's just so much flexibility between those three guys that all have closer experience. They all have setup experience. If Edwin Diaz is unavailable on a back-to-back, you're in good hands. Carlos Mendoza's in good hands. So that's really the primary driving factor of why I'm so excited for this bullpen right now. Let me get to some of these comments here. Ethan is saying Mets love their guys with splitters. Seems like yes, and Ryne Stanek definitely is, fits right into that category. David Stearns also loves guys clearly, especially in the starting rotation, that have sliders, which coincidentally Ryne Stanek possesses as well. Stanek also has a sinker as a fourth pitch, but he only throws it for about 2% of the time, and it really isn't effective. So I chose not to talk about that. Buzz is saying solid bullpen as long as they're healthy. Health is going to be a big factor. It always is with the bullpen. But again, we're talking about all these different names that the Mets have competing. If someone goes down, it's going to be unfortunate, but they have the personnel at this point to mitigate that, particularly if it's like an IL 15 stint and it's not too long, right? That's what we're looking at here. Bullpen is stacked. I also have high hopes on the rotation. Could legit be a super scary lineup to go against if things go well. The Mets roster, I know people don't really want to admit it at this point. The Mets roster is looking just fine. Now, we're going to talk about the cherry on top that would be Pete Alonso this offseason. We're going to get into that right here, actually, after I get to these comments. But yeah, this bullpen, in this rotation, you all have to give, and I'm giving this rotation a chance. Whether they go out and sign a Jack Flaherty, whether they make a trade, which seems a little bit unlikely at this point, especially given what Pat Ragazzo told Rob and myself on the stream yesterday, it seems a little bit unlikely. But at this point, with what we have and the plethora of names that we have, I'm willing to give it a chance up until the deadline, and then we assess. And I know that people don't like question marks, and there are objectively some question marks in this rotation. I will state that, but the Mets are figuring everything else out. They're building a strong enough bullpen to where if the rotation runs into some trouble, there are names that can mitigate that. And you see that all the time, especially shortening the game and adding those early bullpen guys onto this roster, like your swing guys. Tyler McGill could eventually be in that situation. Griffin Canning could find himself in that situation to begin the season, and things are fluid as the season goes on over 162. So I'm willing to give this team a chance as is. I don't think that they're done making moves, but that's all going to rely on their willingness to go above and beyond and blow past that $301 million mark, which I'll get into here in just a second. Joel, I know you like to keep a little bit of an even keel when it comes to this roster. This bullpen is good. I'm going to exaggerate for a little bit because the names that you see right here, it's night and day different when you take a look at what the Mets are starting with in 2025 versus the bullpen and what it looked like opening day in 2024. At least, hopefully, we can agree on that because it's not even close. Sean Reed Foley does not have options. You are correct. If I go back and look at Fangraphs, I believe that's what it will tell me. Daniel, salute to my guy Daniel. Caught a live feed. What is up, Mets fans and CP? Salute to Daniel. I appreciate you being here. Glad you're back. Ryan says, Phil, absolutely 100%. And yeah, going back to last year's starters only go average of 5 2/3 innings, and I don't expect that to change. This comment is a great comment by you, Daniel, because at the end of the day, the entirety of the MLB is really shifting towards this way as well, which is why teams want to stock up on so many viable bullpen arms. And that's why the Dodgers were still able to hang on and win a World Series given their injuries in the rotation because they had such a strong bullpen. Pitchers, more often than not, nowadays, unless you're a guy like Paul Skeens, and I can think of maybe 2 or 3 other guys, Garrett Cole in this league, that are able to go consistently 6, 7, maybe even 8 innings. The vast majority of these guys are going to give you a solid 5, 5 1/3, 5 2/3, like Daniel just said, before you have to bring in that bullpen. The Mets at this point, I know we want a guy like Garrett Cole of that realm in this rotation, but it's simply not going to happen in 2025 for one reason or another. So you have to shore up the bullpen, and that's exactly what the New York Mets did. Okay, that's Ryne Stanek. If you couldn't tell, 25 minutes into the stream, I'm really pleased at where the bullpen is at. Could it always use another arm? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But I would go out on a limb and say that the New York Mets are done adding to the bullpen, and their primary focus is going to be one, Pete Alonso, and then two, if Pete Alonso doesn't happen on the off chance, right? If he walks elsewhere, probably some infield depth. That was the report that I heard. If Pete Alonso doesn't come back, I forgot who actually tweeted that out, but the Mets could shift their focus to some infield depth. I mean, Jose Iglesias, whether you want to bring him back or not, I mean, he's going to directly block the younger guys at that point, and Luis Angel Acuna and Brett Beatty. But I would like to see Jose Iglesias back at a certain point if the Mets don't go the Pete Alonso route. But there's a lot of... I should say there's not a lot of different avenues the Mets could go down objectively if Pete Alonso's not in the equation. And we're not even talking about the stuff that we've been talking about all last week when it seemed like Pete Alonso was going elsewhere as a far-gone conclusion in trading for external candidates at first base, whether it's Mountcastle, whether it's a guy like Spencer Torkelson, etc. But let's talk about Mr. Pete Alonso, because we do have a brand new report as of last night. And I also dropped a video that I recorded, to be very transparent, hours before Heyman dropped the report on Alonso that he did last night, basically after our stream. If you missed that video, by the way, it's an opinion piece by me. I wasn't reporting on anything. I was just giving my 2 cents on the situation. Go check that out. It's on my channel. But the Mets are still in the mix, and they are back talking to Pete Alonso and Scott Boras. And according to Heyman, that process started just under 48 hours after Steve Cohen said what he said at Amazing Day at Citi Field surrounding his displeasure with what he is seeing come his way on the offer table from Scott Boras and Pete Alonso. So this goes in depth about the conversations that are still ongoing. Last week, we heard that the Blue Jays and Pete Alonso were very close on a deal. And now, all of a sudden, the tides are shifting. So why is that? Why is that? It probably has a lot to do with this last sentence in the second paragraph here. But from my drama-free distance, says Heyman, it feels like Alonso desperately hopes to return to the New York Mets, while the Mets could go either way. And he's probably deducing that because the Mets are playing hardball at this point in these negotiations. But, whether the Blue Jays have an official offer on the table or not to Pete Alonso, at this point doesn't matter. They could very well have an offer on the table that hasn't been publicly reported, at least to my knowledge, because I have not seen it. And if they did, that's bad news for them, because that definitely signifies that Pete Alonso wants nothing to do with the Toronto Blue Jays. That is the furthest of destinations that he wants to go to. So we continuously talk about Pete Alonso and whether he wants to be a New York Met or not. All of these sentiments from these reports that we're gathering across multiple different beat reporters is that Pete Alonso wants to be a New York Met. And not only does he want to be a New York Met, the fans want Pete Alonso to be a New York Met. Oh, and by the way, Francisco Lindor has now fully endorsed Pete Alonso in bringing him back. And I know that there's some speculation, and I just want to address this head on because we heard it from the fan guys. I forgot who exactly it was. That's the radio personality that said this. That there was some sort of make-believe rift between Alonso and Lindor in 2024, and that's essentially why the Mets would be moving on. Clearly, that's a fairy tale. Clearly, that's false. Because Lindor at this point, according to John Heyman, has spoken directly with Steve Cohen that he wants Pete Alonso back on this team. And that should at least count for something. It should. It really should. So, at the end of the day, the Blue Jays either have an offer on the table and it's not good enough, right? we keep coming back to this known deal that Alonso turned down with the New York Mets, 3 years with opt-outs, some deferments there, and 68 to $70 million. So that's present day value. So somewhere around, let's say 75 even for 3 years in total value. Now we could assume with what we've heard as well that Pete Alonso doesn't want opt-outs, or he wants opt-outs. He doesn't want deferments. And I don't know what those deferments look like, because that all has to do with the Mets luxury tax at this point and not straying too far away from $301 million. That's what it has to do with. So I'm not sure what we're talking about in terms of the actual figure with the deferments, but it's clear that Alonso would rather get his money up front. And it's also speculated that the other clause in this contract that is being disputed is the bonus money that he would get if he opts out, which I think is still personally ridiculous. Boris has somehow managed to get that on the table and get that done for some of his other clients. But I don't see the Mets, if they have this strong stance against that, and if that's what Steve Cohen was alluding to in terms of the structure, that could be also a sticking point as to why things are the way they are right now. But this is at least good news. Cohen saying that these negotiations are exhausting, more exhausting than the Soto negotiations with Boris, and then finding the strength with what's going on this offseason to go back and speak with Boris, Alonso, in that camp is good news. It's good news for Mets fans. And it's even better news that we heard Toronto being close in their negotiations with Pete Alonso and nothing coming to fruition. And now all the different reports are going back to the other side. I really do think at the end of the day, I know Toronto Blue Jays fans aren't going to want to hear this. I think that they're being used for leverage. I'm sorry. I think they're being used for leverage. And I know that there's a couple of Blue Jays fans that find themselves on my channel, and they're always welcome because I like to hear the other side and the other perspective. But this smells like the Blue Jays being used for leverage, and unsuccessfully so, by the way. Unsuccessfully so. Now, it would be a different story, if we heard concrete reports from Heyman, et cetera, stating that Pete Alonso is close to signing a 3-year, $90 million deal with the Toronto Blue Jays, because you could also assume that the clauses and also the AAV, aren't aligning between the two sides. And it'd be a different scenario at that point, but we've heard, at least I've heard nothing about what the Blue Jays offered. But we do know at this point that Alonso, it seems as if he wants to go back to New York. It just makes sense at this point because, again, if the Blue Jays had a strong offer on the table, if they also weren't trying to be stingy with Pete, if they were really serious about deploying a lineup that had Guerrero Jr. and Pete Alonso both on brand new deals, because in the back of their minds, they still have to worry about extending Vlad Jr. and not risk going into this season that has a lot of complications or implications, I should say, for their front office and their job status, losing Vlad Jr. for nothing. So there's still a lot of hurdles, I would think. And one of the biggest hurdles for the Toronto Blue Jays is actually convincing Pete Alonso to go to Toronto, because it seems like he does not want to go there. It seems like he doesn't want to go there. And that's what I'll say to that. Sign Tim Hill. It could be possible. Listen, it could be possible. So let's take a look at this. This comment is a great segue to the next piece of information that we saw coming actually from Andy Martino. And I know that Andy Martino, a lot of people don't like to listen to his reporting. I think his reporting is fine. I think that, when he tries to talk about the Mets from an opinionative standpoint, that's where when things get skewed. But I've always also wondered this myself in terms of if the Mets are willing to go past $301 million, I think that at this point, that's a no-brainer because whether you bring back Pete Alonso, that's going to drive you way above that point. Whether you even sign a guy like Jose Iglesias for infield depth, that's presumably going to get you past that point, given what he posted in 2024. And if you sign another reliever in Tim Hill, we just saw Tommy Canley go to the Tigers on a $7.5 million deal today, right after Ryne Stanek signed his $4.5 million deal with the Mets. That's going to put you over $301 million as well. But once they cross that threshold, how high are they willing to go? How far are the Mets and Steve Cohen and David Stearns willing to stray away from $301 million? Because I don't think the Mets are done. I think that they have more moves, or at least one more move up their sleeve. I hope it's Pete, but even if it's not Pete, it's a reliever, it's an infield guy. I don't know. There's one more move. That's probably going to bring you past, given what Fangraphs has slated for the Mets luxury tax outlook right now for 2025 as it stands. This is including the Ryne Stanek deal. They're at roughly $297.7 million in the luxury tax payroll. So simple math, that's $3.3 million that they have before they cross the last possible penalty threshold. Because they've crossed all the luxury tax penalty thresholds already. This is the last surcharge, the Cohen tax, quote unquote. This is the last threshold that they would pass. So highlighted in yellow is some important stuff from the perspective of Andy Martino. And he tried to paint this Stanek signing as the Mets trying to save a couple of $1 million to potentially reallocate back to their negotiations with Pete Alonso to try to get that deal done. That's what Martino in his report today was trying to convey. Highlighted in yellow is what I took away from it. $301 million. Every dollar spent over that amount is going to be taxed at basically 110% is what Martino is saying. And the other important piece, which is why I'm not sure the Mets are still looking at, those top tier relievers like Tim Hill, like a David Robertson that's going to cost you $13 to $14 million, right? Like Kenley Jansen that's going to cost you $14 to $15 million. They had been already talking to more expensive reliever options before this Stanek signing, is what Martino is saying. They were even talking, apparently, to Kenley Jansen on a potential deal before Stanek was re-signed. But going the Stanek route and saving pretty much $10 million in signing Stanek to $4.5 million versus $14.5 to $15 for a guy like Kenley Jansen is extra money that they could use for Pete Alonso. I don't know if I see the connection there. I'm just trying to do the math while I'm on stream here and multitask. And I'm like, if they're willing to cross $301 million as it is, and they're also willing to re-sign Pete Alonso to $25+ million, I mean, at that point, it's important to save that extra couple of $1 million for sure. But one could also argue, why not just go for it all? Why not just kill two birds with one stone and get the elite reliever while also getting Pete Alonso? So, again, there's a lot of math implications here as to whether Steve Cohen and David Stearns, their plan collectively is to stray too far from $301 million. So just to open that perspective to you all, because apparently before the Mets re-sign Stanek, they could have had a bigger named reliever, right? I mean, Jansen is a really good option, 3.29 ERA in a Red Sox uniform. Robertson was out there, 3.0 flat ERA in a Rangers uniform. But I like Stanek as well. And I know that you all like Stanek, so I like Stanek. But I like Stanek as well in general. If you guys didn't like Stanek, I still would have liked Stanek because I like his arsenal. I really do. He's a good pitcher. All right, so let me get back into the comments here. Hopefully everything I'm saying in this stream is making sense. I'm trying to piece things together. I'm trying to connect the dots. And I feel like that's something that us Mets fans in this fan base have been struggling to do with the lack of reports from one week to the next and how tides can shift that quickly. So, yeah, Mike, I wouldn't get your hopes up. As I've been saying all offseason long, Pat Ragazzo yesterday on the stream also basically said that they are not really going to trade Vlad Jr., even if they don't come to a extension, right, resolution with him. They're going to at least wait to the deadline. Or he could just sign the extension and he's a Blue Jay for practically life. Salute to Carlos. I appreciate you. By the way, I had a little bit of late night thoughts yesterday, and the recent Heyman report was sitting very well with me. I was very excited. It got me from, down, gloomy in my thoughts about Pete Alonso coming back to the Mets to a little bit more optimistic, right? It's been kind of this seesaw. I've been optimistic. I've always been optimistic about Pete Alonso coming back to the Mets. It makes the most sense for both sides. And then when Cohen said what he said, I kind of lost faith. But now I'm back, and I'm like, this could very well happen. So if Pete Alonso, I'm doing a giveaway. This is my announcement on the stream for all those of you who are subscribed and watching this. If the Mets re-sign Pete Alonso, I will pick one subscriber that comments LGM on my community tab post. It'll probably be a Pete Alonso jersey. I gave away a Lindor jersey, I believe, to Carlos, who's in this stream right now, if I'm not mistaken. I will give away a Pete Alonso jersey if he re-signs with the Mets. You have to comment LGM and smash the thumbs up on this stream right now. And also be subscribed to the channel. So that's that. I agree, D. The bullpen is done. I would say that. I agree with that. More comments here. I'm trying to go up into the chat. It's been a while since I even checked the chat in this stream, so I appreciate all the comments that I am getting. I'm trying to pick some out here. BX, Alonso was the one who rejected 7 for 158. That's all on him. I agree. That's a great point, too, when you're talking about whose fault is this really when it comes to the Mets versus Pete Alonso. Because, yes, Pete Alonso's at fault for turning down that deal. But you know what? At this point, I understand that Scott Boras is trying to do right and save face for his client. But at a certain point, if your client is indicating to you that he really wants to go back to New York and the destination that he wants to go back to isn't willing to budge just because you are trying to set his market at a certain value, at what point do you give in? It's not like Boras to give in. I understand that. But are they really willing to take this into spring training? And that's what Heyman also said in his article, and even Martino, stating that this could go weeks before resolution. And that's what doesn't sit right with me. But what's also interesting in that what came out is that I forgot who tweeted this out. I think it was Rosenthal, might have been Passan, might have been Will Salmon. I apologize. I would like to give credit because they do a great job in doing what they do. But we also heard the report, I'm not sure if you all heard this, that other agents around the league have been blocked by Pete Alonso from even contacting him. Other agents around this league are seeing how this is unfolding for Pete Alonso and how nightmarish this process has been, that they are trying to swoop in and represent him and take him away from the Boras Corporation, to which he doesn't want. And all credit to Scott Boras and him. He's adamant that he wants Scott Boras representing him for the foreseeable future. So he's blocked all contact, all possible contact with any other agents. So I think that's really funny that other agents are like, this guy Boras is really screwing this up for you. Let's try to fix this. But yeah. LGM, everyone's commenting LGM here. I appreciate it. Go comment LGM in the community tab poll. That's going to help me gather everybody's username and randomize the giveaway. So you can comment LGM here, but there's a community tab poll where I announced this giveaway. It was late last night. Go comment LGM over there on the channel, and then we will go ahead and pick a winner when Pete hopefully makes his decision. It's on the community tab of my channel. So I appreciate that. But yeah, listen, $297.7 million, including the Ryne Stanek re-signing. I still will say that I think Pete Alonso is going to be the New York Mets first baseman. I think that it could come as we get closer into February towards spring training, which I always hate, right? I don't like signings that are that far out or that close to spring training, but that's possibly what we're looking at here. But to round this out, I mean, Stanek and the bullpen outlook, as I talked about in the first half of this stream, tremendous. Love everything that was done with this bullpen. Getting the guys back that you need to get back to add to Edwin Diaz and the already existing core, and adding AJ Minter, and also the lesser pieces that will be competing as depth and maybe taking a last spot. I love that. But also these latest reports. I mean, Andy Martino is still very adamant that there was going to be a point last week when he reported that the Mets, or the Blue Jays, I should say, and Pete Alonso were at the 10-yard line in negotiations, that a deal was going to get done. He tweeted that out also and stood on business today because everyone's trying to make that a sticking point against him. And it is a little bit of a bad look, objectively. I mean, I talked about it in my video. It's a little bit of a bad look. But negotiations fell through for one reason or another. It could have been not a strong offer. Could have been that Pete Alonso doesn't want to go to Toronto. Still on the market. And everything that we've been hearing from Lindor getting involved and voicing his support for Pete Alonso to Steve Cohen, to Steve Cohen actually re-engaging in contract extension talks. It's heading in a great direction. If you want Pete Alonso, if you are a Mets fan that wants Pete Alonso. And, just to finish this out one more time, because I just keep having these thoughts in my head, as this just makes the perfect sense to make the strongest lineup possible to bring, back Pete Alonso. It makes sense for Pete Alonso, and it makes sense for the New York Mets. It's a mutually beneficial relationship at this point, because there's not really many other pivot options. I mean, trading is a hard thing to do, especially with an organization like Baltimore. If you really want Ryan Mountcastle, relying on another question mark in Spencer Torkelson with what he provided the Tigers in 2024 is not really appealing to me. All the other options are practically off the board. And no, I don't want to hear about Anthony Rizzo because I want nothing to do with Anthony Rizzo. Is not an option. At least I hope he's not. That would signal extreme desperation. So this makes the most sense. I do respect, and I've been very adamant that I respect the Mets holding true to their stance and their standards that they have in place in the market that they set for Pete Alonso. But ultimately, I really do think that this resolution is going to play itself out, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, and with the New York Mets. My opinion. I appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning into this stream. Salute to Jay. Stanek was a beast in the postseason. Love the signing. Absolutely. 100%. Truman, Pizza Met, lock. I hope it's a lock. Someone will get a Pete Alonso jersey if it happens. Mr. Delight saying LGM. He will make the lineup click. Yeah, I love it. Be patient. Be patient. I know patience really isn't in, the calling cards for Mets fans. My patience runs thin sometimes too with this team. I will be very adamant and very upfront about that, but let's see how it plays out. Pete Alonso still wants to be a Met, and we'll see if the Mets really do want Pete Alonso just the same. So it's a True Mets Talk podcast, True Mets Talk live stream with your boy CP, going into the latest and greatest Mets news. Ryne Stanek is a New York Met again on a one-year deal, $4.5 million, and hopefully Pete Alonso will be a New York Met at this point as well. Smash those thumbs up buttons on this stream, whether you're catching the replay, whether you're watching live. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next piece of information, I would like to get into more trajectories and projections as we head closer into spring training. So be on the lookout for that type of content, while also mixing in the reports that we are hearing from all these different beat reporters. So smash the notifications buttons until the next video, stream, or poll. It's your boy CP. I'll see you all later. And most importantly, have a great Wednesday, and let's go Mets.